So we are so excited to have Juliet Gellatley, founder of animal rights charity Viva, staying with us at the Base Retreat in Bristol. We're discussing the journey of the animal rights movement, and we want to build hope and inspiration for all of us. Starting with the now in the animal rights movement, what do you think is working really well, apart from Viva, of course?
The obvious answer to that is the invention of social media, because it's transformed animal rights campaigning. And the reason that I say that is because, Viva itself started 26 years ago.
Wow.
So you're coming up to almost 3 decades. And before that, I was working for another organisation. So I've seen a lot of change in terms of campaigning. And the reason that I can say that with absolute confidence is that it was the first time it put us on an almost even playing field with the so-called enemy, if you like, which has got literally millions, and I mean hundreds of millions, if not beyond that, to spend in terms of convincing us that we should keep on consuming animals.
Yep.
And so for the first time, we could actually, compete with them in terms of who we were reaching and what we were producing, and in fact do better.
Wow.
So if you can imagine, if you're a meat company, it can be quite hard on social media to get across to people how amazing it is to eat a pig, whereas we really can get across to people how truly appalling it is to eat a pig, being clever about the kind of videos that we produce, about the kind of YouTube ads that we do, the kind of Facebook messaging, Instagram messaging, the kind of people that we influence to put across our messages. It transformed everything.
Yeah. And so does the audience reach, each side's audience reach, is that down to how much money they have? Because obviously the meat industry has more money than animal rights activist movements.
I think the thing about social media is that it's drawn in such a much younger audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're interested in specific issues and the way that they're put across. And I think it's very hard, actually, for animal agriculture to put across something that's convincing to young people that it's okay to actually keep on eating animals.
Yeah.
You can put an ad of a piece of meat. It's not even an attractive product, though, is it? It doesn't look good. So with our side, we have such a story to tell that is of genuine interest to younger people, whether it be coming from a social media, influencer who's talking about it from an environmental perspective, whether it's the 6th mass extinction, whether it's the Amazon dying, whether it's from an animal rights perspective, from the investigations that an organisation like Viva's doing, or indeed from a health perspective. We've just got such an interesting story to tell. So our challenge has been how to put that across in a way that's engaged people, but we've managed to do that. As Viva, we've had several things gone literally viral, where instead of reaching tens of thousands of people, which would have been the case with a lot of the investigations a few years ago, we've kind of learned the game, if you like, and we're now producing stuff that's hitting millions of people.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, millions of people.
Excellent.
And so it is literally a game changer.
Yeah, you have the truth on your side, really.
We have the power of reality on our side. When you think about it, people are aware today, generally, that the planet's in trouble. They may not know the detail of that, but it's generally accepted we need to change.
Yeah.
So it's Viva's job, for example, on the environmental side, to link that to what we're eating and make those connections in a clever way. So a year ago we produced a video which had the voiceovers of Greta, George Monbiot and myself talking about different aspects, very quick, very dramatic, very short, but like you say, it's the truth. And so people really responded to that. It went viral literally within about 10 days. So it already hit 1 million.
Wow.
So in that case, we didn't need to spend the money behind it in answer to that question, because that's the power of social media. People were sharing it left, right and centre in a way that honestly you can't always predict. It just went vroom.
Yeah.
In terms of investigations, the first time that truly went viral was when, in fact, I did a face-off. So I'd been working behind the cameras for years, literally years. And by that, I mean I would be filming what's happening inside a factory farm and then releasing the footage. But I never went on camera, ever. And I decided in 2015 that I would do it. I would talk to camera about what I was seeing.
Yeah.
And in some ways it was a really tough call for me, because I didn't realise quite how much the camera protected me from what I was seeing.
Right, okay.
And then suddenly I haven't got the protection of looking through a lens anymore. I've got the lens on me, and I'm having to talk to camera and talk about these animals that I'm seeing, and so I'm looking them in the eye.
Yeah.
Jesus, suddenly it becomes something else. It personally is a really hard thing to do, but
Much more powerful.
it worked.
Yeah.
And I think it's almost like, because you're saying how awful it is, it legitimizes people's emotions when they're seeing it.
Mm.
And that went viral. So the first face-off we did, it got in traditional media.
Yeah.
And the thing was, traditional media, like the big national papers, like the Daily Mail actually was the first to support it. They were showing the video, the face-off video. So they've got a huge audience. It's the biggest online paper in the UK.
Yeah.
Got a huge American audience, actually. And then we had our own audiences, and then some really big sites were sharing it. It was, in fact, it was before Facebook started putting these warnings on the front of the videos.
Content, yeah.
And this is only 5 years ago. And so it just went huge, and it grew from there. And so from that, what we found was, because I was talking to camera, people would stay with you through the video and actually look at what was happening to the animals, because what was tending to happen is people switch off from cruelty. It's one of the biggest challenges Viva's ever faced, as you can imagine. How do you get a meat eater to watch cruelty to animals? It's not that they don't agree with it, but who actually wants to watch cruelty? So you're finding ways around it all the time. So it has to be engaging enough and powerful enough and dramatic enough for people to go with you. For them to stay with you long enough to actually, for it to plant seeds to change them. And that is, I think, one of our greatest successes, you know, in terms of when I think back to when Viva started 26 years ago, the state of play for veganism and what it is today. There's been absolutely really dramatic and genuine changes in terms of people's, you know, dietary choices.
Yeah.
But the contradiction is that factory farming's got worse at the same time.
Yeah. Well, that was always going to happen anyway.
Well, when you think about it, an intensive or factory farmer, what are they going to do? All they know is how to intensively farm. So what is all the research going to be on? It's how do you do it even more?
Yeah, they're going to turn up the game. Yeah.
And so they have exactly what you say. So instead of a hen laying 300 eggs, they've now developed hens that can lay 500 in a year.
Wow. Yeah.
You know,
by shortening the day cycle and that sort of thing.
Exactly, and the feed and all the rest of it. And the same with broiler chickens. You know, you've got an animal that's now killed at less than 6 weeks old.
Wow.
That's reached this adult ballooning weight.
Yeah. I didn't know it was less than
which
6 weeks
is
now.
It's just appalling, you know. So the pain that's created in those animals. With pigs, it's always the pressure on is like, how do we get them to slaughter weight quicker? How do we get more from the mothers? So instead of a mother having 6 piglets, she's now averaging 13, 14. Averaging.
Wow.
And so it goes on, and they take those piglets away ever younger, so they're now working towards taking the piglets at 3 weeks. You know, and so it goes on. It's about how they get the most out of that animal. So at the same time as veganism exploding in the UK, so intensive farming's got worse, which is why Viva is you know, we made Hogwood, of course, the documentary, but we've just exposed another pig farm, Flathouse, which is in Leicestershire. Yeah. Which people, any decent human being, no matter what your dietary choice is going to be truly appalled at the cruelty and neglect in these places. You can't believe, hey, this is Britain, haven't we got the best welfare standards in the world? Well, no, we ain't.
And Flathouse is a mega farm.
Mega farm.
You said in Leicestershire. How mega is mega?
Well, Hogwarts had about 16,000 pigs. Flathouse has got about 9,000 pigs, so they're big. Yeah. They're big unit for the UK. This is so they're supplying nationally. Both were Red Tractor approved. I tell you what, that's another, I don't know how you'd view this actually, it's an interesting change, let's put it that way. When we started challenging Red Tractor, who is actually trusted by the public, as surveys show, as being something more trustworthy, they think it's British, therefore they think the standards are higher, and so on and so forth. When we exposed Hogwood, Red Tractor refused to drop Hogwood, absolutely dug their heels in. And said we'll just work with them to improve standards. So we go back and say, hey, where are these improved standards? You know, and so it goes. And in the end, when we left hidden cameras and showed men beating the pigs, then they drop Hogwood finally. what we've found, so Hogwood, we first started filming in 2017, so just in the last 3 years things have changed, in that now when we expose somewhere, I could give you multiple examples of this, but Flathouse Pig Farm is one, they drop it within hours of us actually investigating.
Because you didn't let go last time.
It's the persistence of saying, you know, we are not going to give up on this.
Yeah.
We're just going to expose you further and further and further.
Yeah.
We're not going to let you get away with this. So, I'd say I'm a realist. I was going to say skeptical. It's not really. It's just realism. They've changed their PR strategy, knowing that the first one didn't work.
Right.
So now they'll say, right, we'll drop that pig farm straight away and try and remove Red Tractor from it.
Okay.
But my point is, it's just a game to them. It's a marketing game.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise, why are they approving all these? Every single one we go in, practically, is Red Tractor approved.
Wow. Yeah. So is this just something that they're dishing out? It's like a paid for membership, I would imagine.
The standards are just so low.
Mm.
Are just so low, and the British public, that hasn't kind of got through yet. You know, there is no good way of factory farming an animal. It's all about treating them as commodities and getting the most out of them and treating them cruelly, because it has to be cruel to factory farm.
Yeah.
You deny them everything, everything, and then you take their life, the ultimate denial. You know, of a baby. You know, so it's normalising that it's okay to feel that that's abhorrent, because we're kind of brought up to think that there's something wrong with you to care. So Viva's big challenge has been no. Don't go with this, you know, massive marketing con that they've spent billions of pounds on getting society to be convinced that it's that the abnormal ones, the ones living on the edge, are the ones who are challenging the status quo. Instead, in fact, it's absolutely normal and right to feel compassion, to feel mercy, and to not want to treat animals in a cruel way. That is normal.
Yeah. I think people deep down relate to that.
Yeah, exactly. Deep down they do. Yeah. So it's tapping into that, and that's why the face-off worked, because I was on camera saying, this is normal to react this way. This is wrong. Yeah. And they're thinking, yeah, I feel the same way as you. It's just horrible. Yeah. And so it's okay to feel that way. So it's okay to change. Yeah. Yeah, that's really effective.
So you've already answered my next question, which was why is it working, this social media thing? Because you're showing people the truth and it's hitting home. So activism takes many forms. How important is diversity in the ways in which we spread the word?
Absolutely, everything is important. People, I'm afraid it's human nature. They seem to. There's some people that like infighting and they like to criticise others for their strategy. Yeah. The only reason Viva has to be careful in certain senses is because we're a charity. We're a registered charity. Right. And it is no use to the animals for us having that all taken away and, you know, being sued and all the rest of it. So we just have to watch some things that we do. But I would not criticise other groups and their tactics, even if we don't use them, because I just think different people respond to different messages and different ways of putting those messages across, so everything's valid. Yeah, and to be honest and being really frank, the Earth is in such a state now. You know, we're heading directly into the 6th mass extinction. This is not a joke. This is not that somebody's made up somewhere. This is real. Yeah. So it is really urgent that we do something. So I would encourage people watching this that no matter what you feel comfortable, you go with that. You know, so if you want to be you want to give public talks and educate people that way, then that's great for you. If you want to give cookery demos and be a positive sort of action, then that's for you. If you want to join something like Animal Rebellion and you want to stop the cars, then that is for you. You know, go with what is right and what works for you and what motivates you as well. What makes you feel that you can go back for more, because everything in this movement is about persistence. Because no, we haven't got money on our side, certainly when you measure it against the industry. It's scary when you look at their figures that they've got to play with versus ours.
That's right.
But what we have got is, obviously, it's such a cliche, but you know, it's a cliche because it's true. We have got the truth, and what is happening to the world, from everything from the Amazon burning through to the intensive farming of factory farming in the UK and all the damage that that's doing, to pandemics which have been caused by animal exploitation, and we'll have more pandemics if we keep factory farming animals, of course. you know, this is real and this is now, so just do something.
Yeah, and we should welcome anybody doing anything.
Welcome them. And it might not be your style, but so what? They're doing something, and that's great.
Yeah, I agree completely. So, amongst all the different forms of activism which people are employing, what would you say is the primary essence in all this, in all the different methods?
I think that's changed over the years, because when I started Viva, things come in vogue and go out of vogue as well.
Right.
So, for example, when I started Viva, it was relatively easy to get people to go on marches, for example. And we did a campaign, in fact it was against live export, so I don't know if anyone watching this remembers this, but it was one of the first times that farm animal welfare got on the news. I mean, national news every night for about 6 months,
Oh, wow.
which I don't think has actually ever happened since.
Yeah. Whenabouts was that?
So this was in the mid-90s.
Okay.
And it was due to farm animals being exported, and we were trying to stop live exports. And what it meant was, obviously, the issues were widened. So you had images of, for example, little baby calves in veal crates in Italy actually being tethered so that they couldn't move, and people could see how cruel that was.
Yeah.
But those calves were coming from Britain
Right.
and going through horrendous journeys, and people had decided, and maybe this is, you know, a lesson for people, coming back to persistence, it's not just about numbers, it's persistence.
Right.
What people were prepared to do was actually stop the lorries and go to the ports where these animals were being exported from and just cause disruption. So it was a very good example of civil disobedience, actually.
Yeah.
But it was a civil disobedience that didn't negatively affect the general public. It was
Right.
affecting the commercial
It was.
aspects of the trade.
Yeah, it was focused.
Very
Yeah.
focused. And the news that was going out, you could see the cruelty to the animals, because the media was generally supportive, or even if they didn't support it, just by showing the images of what the animals were going through in transport and on the other side
Yeah.
was enough, because the images spoke for themselves, because like you say, it's just the truth.
Yeah.
And this went on literally for 6 months, and live exports was dramatically reduced through these actions. It was a very, very successful campaign. But I have to say, I said it's not about numbers, but what did happen, and one of the reasons it caught the imagination of national media, is because people from every walk of life supported the campaign. So you literally had the old lady with the dog on the
Yeah.
lead coming to the demo,
Right. Yeah.
through to literally what we focused on with children, and nobody did that before we did. And I did wonder, Viva was a very young organisation, and I thought, have I made a massive mistake here? Because we did these marches just for children, under 19s only.
Oh, right.
And so you had kids literally from 3 to 19 or 18 years old speaking about why they wanted animal cruelty to end, and I can tell you there is nothing more moving than children talking about it.
Yeah.
And it was so successful because we got on regional media. And so that was about, it was about organisational skills, it was about persistence,
Yeah.
and it was about publicising the fact that these things were happening, getting people on the streets and people coming out and supporting it. So it was a very big civil rights action, actually, you know, civil disobedience action, I should say. And it worked. So it was successful in its own way. Through to today, where things have gone through different stages, it became much, much harder to get people out on the streets. We went through a real phase of that.
Okay.
So you're having to adapt as a national organisation of, well, what can you get people to do, through to social media kicking in through today, which actually brought alive, funnily enough, people coming back out on the streets because people wanted to film what they were doing and put it on social media.
Yeah.
And so you got this mushrooming of local movements, so everything from the Cube and so on and so forth, which became global because people could see through social media other people doing the same as them in other countries across the world, and that's very empowering. It encourages you to do it yourself.
So the theme, I'm seeing a theme here, is to share and keep sharing.
Yeah.
And be persistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from Viva's perspective, one of the things that has worked when we've really targeted a campaign, if you can target, say for example, let's just take an easy example. Let's take Tesco with Hogwood.
Yeah.
How we won that campaign, you know, was through building up this momentum. To do that, you need people on a local level on your side.
Right.
and we've spent a lot of time nurturing people. And so what we did was, when we wanted a day of action after we'd investigate, so it's a multiple thing. You need to investigate, so you've got, so you're getting the footage out, so you've got to do that side of it. But then what do you do with that footage? Yes, of course it goes on social media, but it's much more powerful if you're reaching meat eaters rather than staying in this bubble. You need to get out there. So you produce campaigns that are aimed at meat eaters, not vegans. And so you got
call that the conversion zone.
The conversion zone, exactly. So you're producing films aimed at them, shortened versions that, and then you're thinking, how do you target? So we, for example, went on Tesco's site, so we're targeting their customers.
Right.
But then you're getting down on a grassroots level. We're saying to our supporters, we need you outside Tesco all on the same day. So this is organisational, but people responding to you and saying, yeah, we'll do that, we'll support that. And so you're outside 150 Tesco stores on the same day, which is much more impactful than people doing it in dribs and drabs. So it's a multi sort of, faceted thing of a national organisation working with grassroots people in a really positive way to make things happen. And then you're saying to people, right, we need you to go inside Tesco store and talk to that individual manager, because that not to attack them, that manager is a human being who's probably against Hogwood. And then on an individual level, you get people saying, yeah, actually, they hate but they're not supposed to say this. They don't agree with head office. Of course they don't. They hate those images. Who would like them? And so they're putting pressure on their own, head office, saying, actually, they're getting so much local PR that's so negative. Is it really worth it? Shouldn't we be pulling this stuff? And you're building up momentum over time. So that campaign ran over 3 years. We said to Tesco, we ain't ever going away on this. You take us on, we're never going to give up. And I mean it. And they kind of got it. She means it, or whoever means it, and I did mean it, believe me.
I'm sure you did.
and I think my most successful campaigners, the colleagues that I've worked with, are people that have got that. Campaigns are not here today and gone tomorrow. And there is a challenge in that, because you're trying to come up with new ideas to excite people and bring them back in, but you have to have that real, like you say, you have to have the fire in your belly, you have to have persistence, and you ain't going to give up, you're just not going to go away.
And Viva certainly has loads of that, and obviously led by yourself, you've had this drive for so long.
You've got to have drive. You've got to genuinely believe, in what you're saying. And I set Viva up for the animals. I think people kind of have got that. We've widened out the issues. Obviously, we've done a lot on health and obviously on the planet, which to me involves animals. It's their home too. And I suppose, it's just having a genuine belief that you can make a difference. And there's been lots of individual campaigns from lots of different organisations, and seeing at a grassroots level if you want to do things grassroots level and you don't want to join a national group, for me that's fine. If you want to join a national organisation because you enjoy that camaraderie and you want to join in with a campaign, then as far as I'm concerned, obviously that's brilliant. Honestly, my focus is just do something. Deeds, not words.
And keep doing it.
I stole that saying from Emmeline Pankhurst's slogan, deeds, not words.
That's right. That's right. It's about action. Walking the walk.
Action.
Great. Okay. I think the movement now is definitely on the map. Veganism is on the map. It's our predecessors, like yourself included. So looking back at the roots of the movement, is it important to know our activism history?
I think it helps, because it helps inform you make the best decisions in terms of how to influence people. I mean, for me now, it's kind of second nature, because I've just got so much experience in terms of what works and what doesn't. So obviously, if you can draw on other people's experience, then why not? It seems silly not to, doesn't it? And I think always having a sense of a movement and its history helps inform you in terms of the best way forward.
Helps to keep you motivated.
It does. I mean, it was really interesting. Before I set up Viva, I worked for the Vegetarian Society, and I used to find that interesting, because when I was there, it was about 150 years old.
Right.
And it was really interesting looking back through their magazines, going to the Victorian era, of what struggles they were going through. and how they promoted themselves.
Yeah.
And in fact, the Vegetarian Society was set up by, you're not going to believe this, by Reverend Cowherd. Can you believe that? And, you know, they produced the Vegetarian magazine, and I would look back through that, and it is inspirational in terms of looking at how they campaigned, how they fought.
And so long ago, I
I know,
yeah.
I know, and the different messaging, taking it forward to today, and also just seeing how far you've come, because, you know, it can be easy when you're looking at the state of factory farming and what animals are put through to feel depressed by that. Of course it can. But I remind myself how far we've come in just since Viva was founded. You know, veganism is transformed. You know, when I first went vegan, it's a long time ago, the only soy milk that existed literally, there simply didn't exist almond milk and rice milk and all the different choices. There was one soy milk, and it was in a carton that was in this like heavy sort of like custard like consistency, and you had to add water to it and mix it with a, you know, to be able to have soy milk, and it was pretty revolting, to be honest. Well, I thought so anyway. And that's just one example of how things have completely mushroomed because of the choices.
Yeah.
When you look at things like influencing meat eaters, it really does matter, obviously, having that food available, because you go out to a restaurant, I could say to now, you know, sort of like a group of meat eaters, I'll just go, let's go to Pizza Express. You know, you put in your code now, as it is with COVID, and you've got the whole vegan menu of all these different vegan choices. Literally, I went to a food conference only 2 years ago, those choices didn't exist.
Yeah.
And that's how much things are changing. And the national restaurants are competing each other. The supermarkets are competing with each other. I've listened to them. I've heard Ocado say to Sainsbury's, we do more choices than you. And it's so entertaining, actually, hearing them try and out-compete each other. You know, when I can remember literally about 7 years ago, when one of the major supermarkets was doing surveys in the different areas of whether they should even label things vegan. And then suddenly, 5 years ago, things just went whoosh.
Yeah.
You know, and instead of them like thinking, will people accept the word vegan? You know, you've got them using the word vegan as the selling point.
That's right. At a certain point, it becomes it becomes significant, and they respond.
I mean, I was travelling the other day. You know, I said to one of my sons, just go outside the service station. What is it that they're promoting? The only A board that they've got. Yeah. We now have vegan. All our pasties, you know, so it was one of the pasty companies. You know, that is the only thing that they're promoting. I went to Smith's inside the train station. The only thing that they're promoting is a vegan Magnum. You know, nothing else, literally. And I was just like, wow, you know, it clearly there is a massive, massive change in terms of them seeing. And when I spoke to the CEO of Quorn, I did an interview for him, and he was very, you know, very candid. He was saying, we love vegans because they are the ones that repeat spend because they're vegan. So they're going to look for vegan products. So if you can get them on board, they're going to keep spending, they like your product, they're going to keep spending with you. Yeah. But of course, their aim is for the so-called flexitarian, the meat reducer. Mm-hmm. That's what all these companies are aiming at, because they know full well, which gives you hope, because their research shows that the meat reducers are actively looking for vegan products. They feel good. It's aspirational to them now. Yeah. Whereas before it was something that might have been classed as extreme or weird. It's completely shifted where it's aspirational. And if you look at the history of any civil rights movement, for example, it goes through very set stages, and it's predictable, and you're moving people along from being laughed at, being thought of as weird, being thought of as extremists, and you're moving people along to the point where you have to convince the public that it's to their benefit to change. Right. And that's the point we're getting to. When you've got David Attenborough saying on a programme about extinction that industrialised farming is wrong and that people have to reduce their meat, the whole globe has to do it. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? That's a very mainstream voice. Very mainstream. Yeah. Very mainstream. You've got the CEO of Pret a Manger saying, I'm really proud that we're doing vegan products, and I know that I should go vegan for the environment. He's not vegan, but he's saying, I should. Yeah. That is a very specific message, you know, and a lot of businessmen who are middle-aged, male, white voices, who traditionally are the ones that criticised us, are now saying, actually, you're right. So things are getting to that point. We're not there. We're not at the tipping point. Again, it sounds a bit of a cliche, the tipping point, but it's just, if you look at civil rights movements, you will see there is a point. And we're heading towards that now. We're getting faster and faster towards it, where the public will say, actually, yeah, we're going to completely screw the planet if we don't do this, and it is in our benefit. And actually the food tastes as good anyway, because they've been convinced enough by all these changes that they can do it, and it's not a big sacrifice. In fact, it's the opposite. All these things are working in tandem, and are speeding up now. You probably sense that. Do you think you sense the speeding up?
Yeah, just from doing outreach on the streets, which I've been doing for around a year now.
Yeah.
Even in that year, you can sense an exponential nature to the way things are moving. Yeah,
I agree. We've started student campaigning. Well, COVID, sort of like altered that, because we were going to freshers' fairs. The point, just a very quick point I was going to make, I can remember, if you go back a decade, when we targeted things at students, obviously, you'd expect it to be an intelligent audience and there's more sympathy than certain age groups, but very questioning. Now we go to freshers' fairs and it's just, we accept we should be vegan. I mean, you don't even have to convince them. They're just like, how do I do it?
Yeah.
And queues of people, and you're just like, okay, things have definitely changed, really have changed. Yeah.
That is amazing. So looking forward to the future of activism and of the animal rights movement, is there any particular direction you'd like to see things moving in?
It's interesting, because we've got to the point where things are becoming so urgent that we actually need intergovernmental action, because we need things to change very drastically, very quickly. And to get to that, I was talking about that tipping point. Viva's been working towards pushing the consumer, the general public, basically to change. Yeah. And there's very good reason for that, because I don't believe you actually get governments to change until you've got the public kind of more or less convinced, and you're getting to that point. Yeah. And that's the point we need to get to actually say, when the agriculture bill is published, that in that bill you have not considered the impacts of factory farming anywhere near enough. So it's kind of starting to put into the public's and politicians' minds that factory farming actually really does have to end. This is not just a slogan, it really has to end. And so it's about continuing to work with the public to push their knowledge base, their confidence, getting them to change, and creating a bigger a climate where you can actually say intergovernmentally, factory farming actually has to collapse. We have to do things in a very different way. So we're starting to do this whole map of Britain, what it's going to look like as a vegan island. Okay. So it's kind of making it real for the public that this is, this is like I say, it's not a slogan.
Yeah, making it, give it a clear vision.
This is a clear vision that en masse we actually really have to do this now, but it's fine because, we can do this, and in fact the world would be a much more positive place, and it's completely doable. Yeah. But to make this transition really fast, you do need governmental help in that transitioning. Yeah. So they're having to push the subsidising of this help from, the classic thing of being a dairy farmer to an oat milk farmer, on the equivalence of that. Yeah.
That's a promising thing to see.
It's a very promising thing to see, and but you do need, and that I keep saying and you do need, because that's what worries me, because I love working with the public, because we've managed to create so much change. As soon as you get political, things start to slow down so much, which I find personally very frustrating. I'm clearly a very impatient person. But that's what we need now. We need to get to the tipping point with the public much faster, and the public need to help us force the tipping point with politicians.
Okay. And are there any exciting new fronts in activism? Are there new sort of techniques or tricks up sleeves or anything like that you see on the horizon?
Not so much new techniques. I think we're adapting to the era of social media. So, for example, the launch for Viva of Hogwood was a relatively cheaply produced documentary, but it's having such an impact because pretty much, in terms of everybody that I've heard of watched it has changed. Yeah. So you're using, for example, in that case, there I mentioned them, Amazon Prime, but it's important because this is a way of reaching the masses. So you're not having to convince the BBC or whoever that they to take your documentary and make it for them. You've got the power as an organisation to get that out there. You've got the power to get things on Netflix and Amazon Prime and really change people, which, as you know, people are really latching onto. So we've had some amazing documentaries that have changed people's minds,
That's
haven't
right.
we, in
And
the
packaged,
last few
yeah,
years?
and packaged in the format of a documentary just has a lot of,
a lot of weight.
Yeah,
a lot of weight. So it's taking the power back, really. You know, for you as an organisation or as an individual, as a documentary maker, that you can actually genuinely reach millions of people now without having to go through the establishment.
Yeah. That's right.
So there are many ways of doing that. I mean, we are getting much more savvy at it. So, for example, with the launch of End Factory Farming, we're producing, for example, YouTube ads, Insta ads, Facebook ads for those different markets, different age groups.
Wow.
Yeah, we're really getting good at
targeting
different audiences and getting out there with spend that's a lot less than it would have been. So, for example, I could just go back, say, 10 years, where to reach that kind of audience, you're having to spend a fortune with major traditional media.
Yeah.
And now we can do it without that. So there are ways of, but fundamentally for Viva fundamentally our investigations are really important. So we're still doing that. That's not new. Again, we've evolved with, now we're using hidden cameras, which again didn't even exist not that long ago, or we couldn't get hold of them.
Yeah.
Now we've got the whole,
And they're a lot more hidden.
And they're a lot more hidden, and we're using drones like we did for just exposing salmon farming. We've used drones, all this technology we're using to our advantage, for example. But then you've got to produce the campaigns around it, and that's in some ways much more challenging, because you've got to then get to the meat-eating public with these messages. So there are a lot, I won't go through them all because people will have heard of them. It's about being clever about what's at your disposal, using them to your full advantage,
being resourceful,
and being resourceful and getting talented people. There's a lot of talented people out there, drawing them in so that they're actually helping you, so you're sort of organising things.
What kind of talents are they specifically?
So it could be somebody who's come out of university and they're amazing at editing videos. It could be that they're amazing at coming up with the right slogans that reach the public, and so on and so forth, and utilising those kind of skills.
Excellent. I've got a random question here. It's a thing that kind of I find quite deflating. I'll just ask you the question. What do you make of the claim that despite the growth of veganism, the number of animals being killed is increasing?
It's true. I'm afraid it is true, because the human population worldwide is still on a very upward trajectory, I'm afraid. You're looking at a really fast human population growth by the year 2050 of 9 billion people, 10 billion people, and within that you have huge swathes of the globe who in their view have been denied eating animal products, and they still see that at the moment as being a display of affluence and all the things that they aspire to. And so you've got massive countries like India, sadly, and China, for example, where meat consumption has just gone through the roof.
It's kind of an emerging market.
Exactly, it's an emerging market. So when you look at it globally, that starts to explain it. And you look at a country like China, where I'm sure people are aware, that's just been shared across social media, the 12-story, pig factory farms in China. So they want to cope with it by building upwards, and they're literally building these tower blocks for factory farms.
I've seen it.
Exactly. And so, and you look at the scale of somewhere like China. And I'm just saying China because it's hard for us to imagine in Britain. The size of the factory farms we go in, I think, are big and they're horrendous. But they're nothing compared to the size level of the factory farms that are in other countries in the world. So that's kind of why. To put it into perspective for Britain, then yes, in terms of meat consumption, there was a survey that came out literally about a week ago, which was looking at supermarket trends, for example, and definitely the amount of meat that was being used in the ready-made meals has definitely gone on a downward trajectory, as you'd expect. The number of vegetarian meals is absolutely skyrocketed, and I mean skyrocketed. It's starting to really dominate, and then vegan meals are coming up behind that, which is exactly what you'd expect, because as you're trying to change the whole of society, people obviously, they reduce meat, then they go vegetarian, then they go vegan. It's still that way, so figures are absolutely following that. But the biggest growth area in the UK is definitely veganism. The investment in it is absolutely huge. And I'll just tell you something that's a little bit more positive in terms of where the meat industry think that they're going, which is very telling. So I'm talking about global meat industry now, not just Britain. If you read through their own literature, which I do, they are very much encouraging their own to go things to like cell cultures and lab meat and all the rest of it, because they know that meat consumption is destroying our planet.
Right.
And it's not even that they're arguing about it, they completely accept it.
Yeah.
The sad thing is, it's almost like, not almost like, it is like, their attitude is that they can push things to the very last degree. So they'll keep killing animals en masse until they're almost forced to stop. But they're expecting to be forced to stop.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, we'll get as much out of this as we possibly can, make all the money that we can, and then at some point governments are going to say, stop, we're going in this direction, we will pay you to go to sustainable farming, we will pay you to go over to lab meats because there's enough investment in now that to do that, and they'll get all the subsidies and money that they possibly can at that point. They're presuming that we'll have a planet left to actually do this, of course. And that's the way that they're operating. It's so commercially driven, it's so cynical, because they know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
But the change in the last few years again is that they're accepting that meat is destroying the planet, whereas before they would have argued that.
Wow, that seems.
And if you look at the like global meat news and the forums, it seems like almost everything that they're writing about is the alternatives and how to go forward. So the awareness is absolutely transformed.
So that's going to the acceptance stage from ignore then, isn't it?
It is. It is. I'd have to say, of all people that are so behind in all this, behind the public, behind industry, it's politicians. If you look at, for example, the Tories that are in power at the moment, when we launched our Vegan Now campaign a year ago, it says a lot for me to say I'm shocked, but I really was actually shocked, disappointed by how low the targets were by the committees that were looking at the challenges of global warming, for example, and their targets in terms of meat reduction was so minimal. They were pathetic, and you just think that's politicians again.
Yeah.
It's,
I'm sure
they're so behind public opinion.
So much of the money that parties will be getting will be coming from the meat industry.
Yeah.
So, they're going to be reluctant.
Well, a lot of them, I think Tories is that typical thing in terms of them being landowners themselves, and a lot of the people who are subsidised traditionally, I mean, of course, with the beef farmers, and all those things being tied in together. But, I mean, that is starting to erode. The whole thing is starting to unravel. That is the positive thing.
Yeah, I can feel that too,
in terms of the agriculture bill, there are some positive things about it if you compare it to the past, in terms of how they're going to reward farmers versus what was happening before. The worry is the lack of speed with politicians, because like I said before, we do need not just governmental help, we need intergovernmental cooperation now.
Yeah.
I mean, Greenpeace is talking about it getting to the tipping point with the Amazon having no return, sort of thing, because the amount of destruction of the Amazon rainforest actually increased during COVID. Yeah. We like to think they sort of like return to nature during those times. That's a bit of a mirage. So that's my concern, is being able to speed things up enough.
Yeah. Well, it is encouraging to see those changes happening.
It is.
That's where I'd like to keep the focus on that encouraging change.
If you look at human psyche, in terms of human evolution, basically we have not evolved in many years, but our thinking is being pushed along by the impact that we're having on our own planet. And if you just look back, like I say, to when we started Viva 26 years ago, 26 years in human evolution is you can't even say a blink of an eye, because it's so much less than that, isn't it?
Yeah.
The changes are gigantic in the UK. I'm talking about the UK now. But it's really important for nations like the UK, Australia, the USA, New Zealand, other European countries and all the rest of it, to be leading the world and saying this is why we're moving away from animal products, because if we don't, we're in serious trouble, and these are the reasons why. Countries who are more affluent have to set that example, And you know, I think that in terms of factory farming, in terms of toppling factory farming, it has to start somewhere.
Yep.
You know, a government somewhere on this planet has got to be brave enough to say, right, we're not subsidising that anymore. Not only are we not subsidising it, we're going to end it. We're going to outlaw it. You know, and we're going to subsidise lab meat. We're going to subsidise vegan products. We're going to subsidise massively because we want to save the world. You know, it has to start somewhere, doesn't it?
Yeah.
On that kind of scale.
Yeah, yeah. I think things are moving fast in the right direction.
I do. I can feel that starting to happen. Those conversations are starting to happen.
Yeah.
They really are. So that is the hope side.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's been brilliant. Talking to you has been so inspiring. And you're a real inspiration. I just love the fact that you've just been, your persistence is just amazing, and that's what you said this activism needs, is persistence. That's what works, and that's what has got us where we are now. And that's been great. Thank you so much for your time with us today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me here.